Okay, sounds good. So we're very happy to welcome Mike Kalfus. So Mike is an experienced global life science marketer, entrepreneur, and communications executive with a track record of developing and launching new products and utilizing innovative cutting-edge technologies to solve business problems and increase the quality of life for patients around the world. Mike is currently the Chief Commercial Officer for GrapheneAI, a Singapore-based artificial intelligence decision-making platform. GrapheneAI, founded in 2014, is one of the leading AI companies operating in the life science marketplace. Prior to this, he served as Senior Vice President of Business Development, Global Customer Experience at Eversun. Prior to his current role, Mike founded and ran a successful global communications consulting firm that helped both small and large life science companies develop a more data-driven and analytical approach to patient and HCP marketing. During this time, he formed MammoGrip LLC with his partner and inventor of MammoGrip, Nancy DeRobertis. So Mike holds a Bachelor of Science in Marketing and an MBA in Finance and Marketing from the University of Hartford in Connecticut. He's undergone leadership training at Harvard Business School and is a frequent presenter at Global Customer Experience Insights conferences. On the personal front, Mike has been married for 35 years. His two boys, 31 and 26. I understand one of them is joining us on Zoom. Enjoys skiing, golfing, and playing guitar in his Vermont home. So welcome, Mike. Thank you.
I'm not sure which one's joining by Zoom, but one of them's birthday is today, so happy birthday. Well, it says allow recording, I'm allow recording. Okay. Everyone's talking about artificial intelligence. Up until 3 years ago, I had a very small understanding what AI was and is and how it's being used. But I thought we'd show something from a recent clip of a young actor who will talk to you about AI. Everyone's talking about AI, but what I'm going to talk about today is artificial intelligence and healthcare analytics. Really going deep into what artificial intelligence is, how it works in healthcare, and give you some examples and case studies. So we're going to talk about what it is, our definition, the difference between generative AI and analytic AI, how the engine works, how our engine works. Today I'm talking specifically about GrapheneAI and how our engine works. Everyone has their own different algorithm and different processes, but that's what we're here to talk about. How the data sources and the need for privacy. Privacy is probably one of the most important things and regulations of data in AI. It's talked about all the time, so we'll talk about the importance of that, especially in healthcare, when you have private data around your health. I'm going to give you a case of DTC analysis, DTC standing for direct-to-consumer advertising. How many people out there have actually seen direct-to-consumer ads about everything from diabetes to weight loss? Anyone? Target audience is probably a little bit younger, but there are some out there. And then the last thing is talk about the need for a human in the loop. And this is the most important thing, having a human in the loop while you're training the AI engine and making sure that when you report back out, there's someone there who has an eye for how it's like being a human. And that's really the key thing for us to focus on. Now, this is the definition for today. And actually, I wanted to define it. I think about there's about 1,000, if not 2,000 different definitions of AI. But for today, we're going to define it as the ability of a machine to do things faster and with more accuracy than a human can. Because a machine, or we call it AI engine, more of a high-powered and high-functioning, unbiased, well, less biased brain. So everything from learning, from reasoning, to understanding. And I'm going to also read the quote from Alfred Whitehead. I don't know, has anyone read this book yet? The Master Algorithm? Excellent book. So Alfred Whitehead, who was the inventor of process language. Civilization advances by extending the number of important operations we can perform without thinking about them. Right? So AI allows us to do things without thinking about them. So how's it being used right now? Automation. How many people here use Amazon? Raise a hand. How many expect to get your things in 2 hours? Right? Because, yeah, if not faster. And that's artificial intelligence is used for increased productivity and efficiency. User experience, content, personalization. You call an 800 number. Welcome back, Michael. They actually don't know I prefer called Mike because my mother uses Michael. So, but it's Mike. And then decision making. And this is where we get into working and decision making. There was a John Wanamaker, who was an old, he actually invented Macy's. He was a retailer. And his quote was, 50% of my advertising work is working. Just not sure what 50% happened. He couldn't measure it. And he died over 100 years ago. And now he'd be so happy to know that you can know exactly what's happening, who's making decisions, who's purchasing, why they're purchasing, what creative actually worked well because of AI. Yeah, marketing campaigns. We can measure things, customer service and healthcare, consumer packaged goods. These are all areas that we use. We do it from optimizing campaigns to getting higher sales, operations. That's what's the most important, is understanding how to use it to make better decisions. And what types of AI are there? And this is, there's narrow, there's general, and there's super intelligence. Right? And from a functionality-based perspective, memory-based AI, theory-mind AI for psychologists, reactive AI, which is based on real time, just reacting to something, there's no previous history, and then the self-aware AI. And this is where people start getting a little uncomfortable with self-aware AI, but again, self-aware AI sensor responds, but the engine knows that it's a human who's asking the questions. So there's a lot there we can talk about it under the Q&A, but these are the types of AI there is, and people with the computer science and linguistics background understand what those are. But now, deep dive into healthcare analytics. How is AI now being used, right, to help do things? So I want to just a quick video. This is from last Sunday on CBS, and it's talking about how artificial intelligence is used to help identify breast cancer.
Amazon isn't alone in using AI. Doctors are now using artificial intelligence to detect breast cancer. A new study out today shows that a new tool from researchers at Northwestern School of Medicine is sparing patients from unnecessary treatments. In tonight's Health Watch, CBS News chief medical correspondent Dr. John LaPook talks to doctors and patients about how the technology could save lives.
Tahila Harris was only 32 when her mother died of breast cancer.
My mom was very concerned about my level of risk.
Harris gets screened regularly at Mount Sinai in New York, where AI is used to assist reading mammograms and breast sonograms.
The doctor said that they have this new technology with AI, and would I be interested? I'm like, sure, sign me up.
So again, it's being used all the time in healthcare, and if we can save life one at a time, we're going to try to do that. So that's the important part about how AI is being used in healthcare analytics. That's for diagnosing a condition. But now, generative AI versus analytic AI. So generative AI is natural language processing. Everyone knows what GPT stands for, right? Generative pre-trained transformers or neural networks, and they're used to help understand and help with creativity. So transform marketing and advertising campaigns, enhance designs, product design, as well as personalization. Analytic AI gets more detail oriented. It's more in the fact of qualitative and quantitative data, understanding what consumers are thinking, feeling, and doing, using that information for testing, what creative works best, A/B testing, predictive modeling. Can we predict what a consumer is going to do based on using artificial intelligence? And more importantly, business intelligence. How do we use this information to make better business decisions? Okay. Again, creativity and insights, economic modeling, longitudinal and longitudinal studies allows us to get deeper into what information we need to make better decisions. type of data sources. There's, from an internal perspective, if you're a company, you have internal data, people calling the call center, having information, studies, social insights, watching digital social trends, what's happening, what are people talking about on TikTok. But there's also external data, social media, user reviews, decision threads, people talking back and forth, forums and blogs. In one of our case studies, we did some work in diabetes, and we presented the data, and the client, when presented the data, this is where they called. They got the information from a dating site. This is from a dating site. It's not about diabetes. Well, no, in the dating site, there's a forum for people with diabetes. How do you do it? Type 1 diabetic, type 2. How do you handle it when you're dating? So you get those information by analyzing, using artificial intelligence to get the true understanding of what someone said. So this is now deep dive into the engine. How does it work? How do we get our data? So we have a 41 parameter algorithm that allows us to determine who a doctor is, who a patient is, to the level. Now, the important thing is all the data we have is anonymized and aggregated. We won't know that Dr. Anna Feldman said something specific. That information is private. We won't do that. So what we do is take all the information, we read the documents. So the engine is reading all the documents, everything from a decision thread to an IRB approval, which is a hospital review, to FDA data. All these things are being read. And all the information is then put into themes. So you find relationships, you convert it and quantify it, and come up with certain themes. So our engine takes unbiased conversations, right? These are spontaneous conversations that are happening on the web, digitally, socially, anywhere, come up with themes. How's it work? Well, the data, internal, external. Into the engine, 41 parameter algorithm, and it sends out information on themes. Eco-friendly, works faster, ease administration. These are used in pharmaceuticals. Some people like taking a pill versus taking an injection. All these things are used to understand what people are feeling, what patients are thinking, and what doctors are thinking. And then we put it into a positive scale, a Likert scale. And then using models come up with really true insights. And the cool thing about our engine is that we have a 15-point Likert scale. Everyone familiar with Likert scales? On a 0 scale from 1 to 5, okay. Ours is 15. What that allows us to do is to show whether someone likes something. Someone thought it was great. Someone thought it was fantastic. Someone thought it was really fantastic. Emojis, heart emojis, smiles, right? So you want to be able to get that sensitivity. You want to be able to understand specifically how someone feels. Because unlike traditional market research, when you're asked a question, there's bias built into that, right? There's bias. I don't want someone to feel bad like that. It happens with doctors, happens with patients. It's really hard to get these true insights. But our engine and others like that will allow you to really understand what someone's thinking, feeling, and doing, because you're not asking them a question. You're analyzing what they're doing, what they're saying. So it's true, unbiased insights, and that's what AI can do, especially in healthcare analytics, where no one wants to talk about it. No one wants to say, oh, I'm a person with diabetes, and not like you walk around proud of that. So you really want to understand from the healthcare perspective what people really think. So AI allows us to do this. And before we jump into things, I just want to show you that this is generative AI, and this is something we actually put together. This is a module where you can take information. A lot of our clients are actually have years and years of data. This morning I was on a call with the Gates Foundation, and they wanted to talk about we don't do anything really. We just give grants and money. So, okay, that sounds great. But they have all this data. Can we take this data and analyze this data, years and years of research? Is there a nugget? Is there a kernel of something we can get in that data? Sure, we can do that for you. And that's how this works. Get the transcripts. What do you want to find out? Upload it, and then you get your report. And this is this is done for $100. So AI, what is it good for? Absolutely everything, right? So you're saving money. and you're more efficient, get better insights. But the question that the Gates Foundation had was, well, a lot of the data we have has not been de-identified. Can you de-identify? This is where you want to get data. You don't want to know who is that person. So can you de-identify? The answer is yes. There's processes you can use to de-identify. The main goal is to have it anonymized and aggregated, but if there are some identifying factors, you can actually remove that using artificial intelligence. Going back to privacy. GDPR is global data privacy, global data protection regulations. HIPAA is for healthcare information. You know, sometimes you sign forms for your mom or dad, whatever, you can talk on behalf of that person. And then each, and the CCPA, this is for California, but each country has their different views on what data is private, which is not. So we want to make sure that all these privacy elements are always handled. And then the data security is ISO 27001. That's the international operation standards where you have to make sure that all your data, everything you have, is yours, it's private, it cannot be tapped. And that's what's also important when it comes to healthcare analytics and using AI. You need to make sure that all these things are protected. Deep dive, healthcare. The way our engine works, it has a semantic hub, grammar, and has knowledge, domain knowledge. So grammar, so we understand if a doctor's talking, the doctor will be saying things like, oh, this person came in with a myocardial infarction and they should be seeing getting on a beta blocker. What does that mean? It means something for your doctor. If you're patient, you would want to hear things like, I just had a heart attack. What drug is he going to give me? Right. So that's the grammar. So we know who is talking based on how they're saying it. And the knowledge is we're training it on knowledge specific medical field. So this is where the training comes in. So every day, we have 10 people back in Bangalore who are actually training the engine based on new information. RT, CRISPR, mRNA. Years ago, no one knew what mRNA was, but now with COVID testing. So the engine trains on that. So it has both a semantic understanding grammar, and then also on the knowledge from the domain perspective. So grammar, I got muscle ache, pain relief, backache. Well, the knowledge is the naproxen diclofenac, sorry, which is actually a product, topical product. And that's the knowledge. So you basically train on the knowledge of the drug, of the domain. And so that's what the engine has to be trained on all the time. Personally, our company just focuses on consumer packaged goods, which are like gummies and topical Salonpas, pain relief, but as well as consumer packaged goods, gummies that we talked about, but also pharmaceuticals. But they're trained on that language, the specific language. So how do we get the information? We know someone's talking about gout, not personally, of course, but someone's talking about it. NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, what are you taking? But we get the information from medical forums, symptom checkers, the WebMD, doctor groups, talk about arthritis, as well as patient groups. And all these data points, all these things are analyzed in a way that allows you to come up with what the true insights are. Okay. I'm going to show you a detailed example of what a DTC ad and how we measure it. So people with diabetes come in. We look at discussions that are happening about A1C. We look at the modules, so the training module comes up with what maps are being done, how many people are talking about it, what are the importance, the strengths of these things, and then ultimately how do you convert them into numbers, what percentage we're talking about. Let me show you an example of what. She dances and she talks about her A1C. So you remember seeing her. So she's out there. Sorry about that. But the ad was about a woman talking about her A1C, taking a product called Jardins. And that's the campaign. So what our engine does would analyze, listening to those spontaneous conversations. How many people saw the ad? Right. And who were they specifically? People who saw the ad, who liked the ad, who were more digitally savvy, online 60 Minutes, they had the top indication, and they all have private insurance. So it allows us to understand who the patients are, deep dive into the profiles of who the patients are. Allows us to understand positive conversations, what are happening. I like this product because it's easy to take. And this is where you get into a conversation regarding taking a pill, taking an injection. A lot of the products out there now, Ozempic, you see, are injections. So taking a pill is easier. And the discussions, what are the negative things? Too many restrictions, diet, the lifestyle has to be changed. But these are things that marketers need to understand in order for them to change their messaging. So you want to be able to use artificial intelligence to come up with those insights. Reasons for considering a drug, these are different channels. So we know what channels they go on. Channels are on TikTok, what social media are they on, what websites are they on. You analyze these things using artificial intelligence. And a lot of questions that aren't being asked is, do these ads for consumers, do the doctors actually see them? And the answer is yeah. Doctors actually are actively looking at ads on TV and then making an impact. So again, you go from identifying diabetes patients, who's talking about the drug, what are the two cohorts, how do we analyze the difference between both of them, and then what are the cohorts and what do they really say? So this allows us to put a context and a framework with which to look at the advertising. This is another example of using AI for identifying, and this is a comparison that's done with gummy vitamins. So we could, again, not interviewing anyone. Again, traditional market research is about interviewing someone. Did you see the ad? What'd you like? What's the review? We can do that in seconds using artificial intelligence, coming up with tracking of brand ratings. And let me tell you, ratings and reviews probably one of the #1 drivers of decision-making when it comes to purchasing products, these over the counter. And actually not just over the counter, but you ever go to a restaurant, you look at the reviews, food was terrible, you're less likely to go to that restaurant unless you want terrible food and bad service. But again, that's how it's being used. And we can do the same thing for over-the-counter drugs. You can actually measure what e-commerce channels are they on. Are you using Amazon, using Target.com, Walmart.com? What are you doing? What are the reviews? And really understand the reviews by brand. So you can look at, it used to be very difficult, talking plus thousands and thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, to get insights regarding what consumers are thinking, what brands they like. You can now use artificial intelligence to do all that work. The issue is people don't like change. So making a change and having the ability to do something different takes time. 3 years ago, when I started talking about this, people were like, yeah, the whole AI, I don't really buy it, it's kind of fad, it's not going to work. And now fast forward 3 years later with ChatGPT coming on, people understand AI. Well, that's generative AI. But we're talking about analytic AI. We're analyzing insights and then helping people change behavior to do something different. And that's the goal here. And the last thing is training. We talked about training the engine before. Every day the engine is taught. We have double PhDs teaching the engine in a domain-specific thing, what diabetes is, what's asthma, training it. Here's a new cohort, here's new information that has to be understood, train it. But we also have a human in the loop. His name is Mohan. He sits in Bangalore. Everything that comes out of our engine, everything that's presented to a client, any insight, he looks at beforehand and says, yeah, that looks about right. We have doctors on staff looking at that to making sure that is right as well. So again, having a human train the engine, having a human in the loop to make sure what we're saying is correct, that's what's important. And artificial intelligence is going to help us do that. It's not going to take jobs away. It's going to help us do the things that we don't want to do faster. So with that, I'll take questions. Thank you. Yes.
It's really interesting stuff. With the training, when you were talking about kind of you had the flow of the marketing process and talking about here. I know it probably varies by problem, but when you are training it on all of this data, is it a supervised process where you have something that you're trying to predict, or is it more like an unsupervised process where you're giving it all this data and it's finding out the insights and the connections?
It's a great question. It's actually, it could go either way. Most time we do it with unsupervised. We let the engine, so the client, I'll give another example, it's not healthcare related. Back during COVID, we had a client said who was in selling liquor, beer, wine. 20% of our sales now are actually online. Why? And 80% are still actually in liquor stores. But why is that? So that was the question. So we just put into the engine, why are people purchasing online or at the store? That was a question. Came back with people who buy liquor, wine, beer, whatever, online, do it because they want to pair it with their food. And the reason people still go to the liquor store to get liquor is because they have more choices. So the engine analyzes that in a way that it was the questions put out there, but the engine does the work to come up with the themes that we talked about. And that's really what it is. It's understanding what themes are out there. And think about it as a topic tool. So it allows you to come up with the themes that are being discussed, top 3, top 5, to better understand what is happening. Does that answer the question? Yes.
Are you concerned with model overfitting at all? I'm thinking about, I have never written a review of a product ever because I don't feel strongly one way or another. Whereas a lot of the data you're going to be getting or might be extreme, positive or negative. So is that something you talk about in your team?
Self-service, yeah. So people who are more likely to do it because
Right.
they're on. So we the way the engine works, we actually take away from that. So it's it's a random sampling. In fact, one of our first clients said, my target audience is 45 plus. No one's really going on the web and listening to this stuff and analyzing it. But the fact of the matter is they are. So we oversample for that to come up with that, to take away from the bias on that. So yes, there is a discussion on that. That's why I said in the first, or less bias, because we try to minimize as much bias as possible. Yes.
Yeah, so there has been a lot of discussion about AI safety recently, right? And my question is, when it comes to unsupervised learning, we know the parameters that we are looking for, right? And the output that we expect, and the person, the human in the loop, is able to validate an output, right? That's the whole point of having the human in the loop. However, my understanding is that we are not yet capable of looking at what happens in the neural network, for example. We don't really know what is going on within the AI itself. And so what are the steps that you are taking towards making that a possibility, maybe in the future, really understanding what is the AI thinking when making these predictions?
It's a great question. So the way we handle it is by the training. So you're not quite sure what's happening in the neural network, but if you train the engine to think a certain way, it will allow you to come up with those answers. For example, we had a product called Raid, right? Raid kills bugs. Put it in there. Engine's like, bad, killing. No, it's okay to kill bugs. But it's not okay to kill other things. So we had to train it to understand that killing a bug is okay. So that's how it's in the training process that you go through in order to come up with that, this kind of self-aware approach to analyzing the data. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Yeah.
I just have one more
Yeah,
question.
sure.
Would it be a possibility that then, you train it to basically come to the understanding that killing bugs is okay, but then itself maybe it will try to do an inference and try to suppose that something else that's not supposed to be killed should be killed.
Right.
And how is that controlled?
With the training, the output will come out.
Okay.
So every day it's trained and then the output, it will be revised. If they see that, they tell them, no, don't do that. So it's like, look, you're teaching it. It's a learning module and it's constantly learning. The key thing, that's why it's important to keep everything private, and to make sure that it's trained in a way that meets values and something a human, and that's why you have the human in the loop. But the training is done by people, humans. Question, yeah,
We have a couple of questions from the chat, so.
Okay,
so
yeah.
I'm gonna read to you.
sure.
So how can AI be optimized for early detection of potential health pandemics?
Mhm.
And what factors should be included in predictive models in that case?
So the question regarding, so like, example with breast cancer using artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence can have predictive models that are used to predict certain things, certain cancers. For example, drugs like Humira has 16 different indications. But Humira doesn't work in 30% of the people who try it. Just doesn't work. So AI can be used to predict, okay, for that person, based on his genotype, based on his DNA, based on everything about him, is less likely to have success using Humira. So let's put him on something else. Okay. So I hope that answers that first question. Would you do me a favor and ask the second question?
What factors should be included in predictive models?
Which factors? I mean, in terms of exogenous variables, which factors should be included there? Every factor, you include as many factors as you can that's going to help you predict something and then do something with it. For example, when we do any type of project, we always look at what's the insight, what are you looking for? Right? But more importantly, what are you going to do with the information once you have it? So that's the predictive portion of that you want to be able to do. You want to be able to predict the future, but ask the question so you can do something with the data. Many times what we see is that when we do an analysis, we just collect data just for collecting data's sake, but nothing is really done with it. So what information do you want? And more importantly, what are you going to do with the information once you have it?
I have another question.
Okay.
In the chat here, so does having a human in the loop mitigate noise like what? And if so, how is it filtering that out?
So the question with the human in the loop, does it filter out unnecessary chatter?
Yeah, how does it does it help mitigate like noise like what?
So that's a good question. So the human in the loop, the goal of the human in the loop is to make sure that the information that's presented is in line with human values, is in line with what the insights were supposed to be. Okay. The engine is the one that's supposed to be going through and mitigating and taking out some of the noise. For example, the information we have in our engine, 90% of the data we get, 90% of it is actually not used because it's bot, it's spam. In fact, we had one client who said, I want you to do an analysis of our key opinion leaders in the area. And so we did a whole analysis, came up with Dr. Chang as one of the best speakers, always talk about our brand. And then we came back and like, well, we didn't find Dr. Chang, he's not in your analysis. We went back, let me check, maybe we did something wrong. Went back and found out that Dr. Chang is actually is a bot. It was a spam, it's a marketing bot. It wasn't really KOL. So the goal is to actually use the engine to filter out what is noise and what is not, and use a human in the loop to come back and make sure that that makes sense. Yes.
What about, this might be an extreme example, but going back to your example of Ray killing bugs. What kind of safety factors are built in so that Ray goes out, kills all the bugs, including butterflies?
Oh.
And when we realize that, oh, we didn't train it properly, all the butterflies are gone. I mean, what kind of safety built-in safety functions are there in AI? And I'm thinking more in terms of medicine, drugs, like, oh,
Right.
gee, that killed a lot of people.
Right. So that's so from a drug development perspective, I mean, there's drug development, AI is being used a lot now. And it used to be where Drugs used to take thousands of different iterations, different testing. Developing a drug is phase 1, there's phase 2, phase 3, and then post-marketing. Phase 1 is when you do it in animals. And now we're using AI, so we don't need to kill animals, the mice, the rats, the rabbits, to come up with insights. So it's being used to take away from some of those things. It's not foolproof, it's totally not. But AI is being used now to help develop drugs faster and make sure the ones that are being used will less likely have harm than others. And it's a good question. I think that's what's gonna, and I think the regulations that are happening right now, the guidance and the guidelines that are being put on AI is important. You have to come back and constantly look at that. It's something you just don't put a guideline out there and let it just sit. Revisit them based on actual data. And I think that's really the thing, and that's where the training as human loop comes in, is actually looking at the actual data, seeing what the output is, and see what happens from there. Yes.
Just curiosity, have you considered analyzing generative AI? You say sometimes we get data, but the data is not interesting. So, and you talk about marketing. Did you try to use generative AI, or are you considering looking into it to understand what's interesting in the data or how to use the data?
That's actually a good question. No, actually, so generative AI, again, we had a conversation this morning with the Gates Foundation, who are focusing on sustainability. And they have a lot of data about that. And so we're trying to look at the data that's already been generated and then come up with themes of the stuff, of the content and data that's already been used, right? So the goal is to take as much, is to combine the generative AI with analytic AI to come up with a smarter way of doing things. So that's a great question. It's a great question. Yes.
Back on the concept of drugs within the healthcare industry, I know one area where I've heard AI is potentially going to be beneficial is like interactions of drugs, because there's so many drugs people can be taking. It's always been a problem of all the possible interactions starts taxing the capabilities of your traditional like regression statistical modeling. So is there any stuff going on within your company, or you're hearing about how using AI to see like optimal combinations of medications or dangerous combinations, or
a lot of our clients, I understand. So the question is, are we using AI to come up with a better way to predict either efficacy or safety? And the answer to that is yes. I mean, that's the drug development. A lot of our clients, the AstraZenecas of the world, Sanofi of the world, are doing those types of things where they're actually looking at drug and drug interaction, going down to actually the doctor levels as well. Because many times when you see a doctor, especially in the older populations, you don't get the questions that are asked. You don't know what drugs are you currently on, and the counterindications are incredible. If you're on one drug, you should be taking one. So that AI will actually help predict that as well. Yes.
I have several questions. One is the one I'm looking at the slide, and you have a human in the loop.
Yep.
And I keep thinking, how many humans in the loop do you have? Do you measure the agreement between them? So what does it mean to have a human values? So we might have different human values. We might have, different opinions and things. So
Right.
Who decides how to devise things?
That's a good. Well, if Mohan was here, I'll let him answer that question there. But he, so we have several different. So I think the question is around how do you trust one human? Yeah. And you really can't trust one human, but you have this human in the loop, and then you have human oversight as well. So what we see from our human in the loop, we have confirmed by medical doctors as well. So you always need it's like you're chairman of the board, but you have the board to take care of you, right? Just in case something happens. And I'm not talking about open AI or anything like that right now. That's a whole nother topic. But you need oversight. You need guidelines. So the human in the loop is, there's humans in the loop from everything from training to making sure that the output that we have is correct.
It's just, for example, in NLP, right? So you create data that is labeled data. It doesn't matter for what, right? So you usually have multiple annotators, multiple people who would just, then you need to measure the agreement with them, right? So to look how much they agree. Because they don't agree, so at all, so.
Oh, I see. How do you, right, so that goes back to the original definition is less biased. Right, but there will always be some bias, but the goal is to minimize the bias. And the way, like we talk about market research, when you do market research traditionally, there's bias built into the questions that you're asked. And who you ask the questions of, right? But it's the goal of marketers, the linguistics, the computer science people, the market research philosophers and psychologists to understand it. So you need to kind of always have we'll call it a guiding principle over all the insights, and you can't trust this one person just to do everything. You need the kind of governance board, and that's kind of what I think is important now, is having the governance around those people in the room. You're allowed, yes, you get sponsored today, so sure, go ahead.
So, as a follow-up to the question that Larissa read, from the chat, right? So you were talking about genetic information and drug, effects and also side effects, right? So, and that some drugs might work on, certain group of people and do not work at all for a different group of people. And so in combination, let's say with genetic information, you can figure out what's going on, right? So how do you obtain this data? So how do you get this genetic information? So who signs the consent? So how do you, and then a related question, I think you mentioned a couple of slides ago, about something about what people say about a certain drug, and then you have the information whether they have private insurance.
Right.
So how do you obtain that information? So it's just.
Okay, so there's two-part question. One is, how do we ensure that the data privacy is that's through HIPAA, the Health Information Privacy Act. That is supposed to allow you to keep all the data intact. Also, most hospitals now, doctors have what's called EHR, which is electronic health records, and those two are meant to have the data privacy around it as well as data security. So that's where it's kind of housed. Can it be tapped into? Hopefully not, but it's possible. But that's where the ISO 27001 comes in, is making sure that data is secure and no one can get to it. But that's where the data is housed. And each person, and we're kind of moving towards a place where everyone has on their phone everything that they need from a health record perspective. So when you go, in 5 years from now, you bring your phone in, if you're a person 75 years old who has 18 different conditions, you just scan your QR code and pop comes up and everything about you, everything you're on, and maybe not genetic, what you're that you're half Irish, Scottish, whatever, but it will let you know what information you have that's important for the doctor to treat. So that's one part of the question, right? I mean, so is there foolproof ways of monitoring this? No. But those are things that we need to continue to do and provide guidelines around as we move forward using AI in these ways. And yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, I guess following up on that, because I think the one I had the question about too was similar, where you said the ad, people that watched this ad ended up X% had private insurance. Right. So I guess the question is I click on this ad on my browser, how does it link up with some account of mine that figures out I have private insurance if I'm not getting that question?
It doesn't. It won't have it. It will just say, so people who see the ad will say, I saw that ad, thank God I have private insurance.
Oh, okay. Like in a comment on the video or something like that. Okay.
More likely to have. Yes.
I have another question here in the chat.
Okay.
How would a pharmaceutical company incorporate adverse event reporting in this process if the data is blinded for privacy?
So I understand. So the data is all anonymized and aggregated. So there are no adverse events being reported because there's no drug mentioned and there's no specific product mentioned or message mentioned. So since everything's anonymized and aggregated, there's no way you can find out that someone had an adverse event. You cannot go back to the fact that, Dr. Anna had an adverse event at this point. They won't get that information to that specificity. So there's no adverse events at all being reported because it's anonymized. That's a good question. Yes.
So for you, what is the balance between giving more information and refraining from giving information? Because in theory, the more information we give to an AI, we expect better results. So for example, the process of just identifying certain things gives less context to this AI, and therefore kind of restrains it in terms of its effectiveness, I would say, in theory. So where's the balance between restraining and giving information?
So I'm going to go back to I think you're talking about some of this, right? So the context. So the knowledge base here, and this is semantic base. What are people actually thinking and saying? This is where those insights come out. And will you not share certain things? No, the goal is to share as much as possible when it comes to semantics. What are people thinking, feeling, doing? And combining it with the knowledge of that domain is where you get those insights. So you want to make sure this the context, the semantic. This is the hub. This is part of the engine that's most important. But that's where people are talking and using the right words. This is where you'll know someone's either a doctor or a patient or a payer, for example. So the goal is to understand as much of that as possible, provide that context, provide those insights. So you will tend towards, to answer your question, tend to giving more and getting more information of the engine. And sometimes when we present data and the clients will look at it and say, that doesn't make sense. We don't see that. And our research says X. We say, well, we have Z. And the reason is because we're letting the engine analyze the conversations, right? These spontaneous conversations come up with insights. So the more context we have, the better. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to get your vision about analytic AI. So if I understand correctly, nowadays analytic AI is still a data mining model based, data driven methodology based models, machine learning model, deep learning model.
Yeah.
But I feel with generative AI now people talk about agent, but it's possible to train a generative AI agent that can automatically do
Analytics.
Yeah. Then in the future, maybe 5 years, we can focus on training a more, intelligent analytical AI to do all this. You don't need to manually put. I will use this model to do this classification, to this preparation for the groups. What your opinion?
I think the future, combining generative AI and analytic AI is going to continue to grow. And I think there'll be more and more single offerings of both of those things than there are right now. I think right now, from a growth perspective, you have to bifurcate generative AI. Okay, I get it. And most people, when they say AI, they think generative AI. From an analytic perspective, how do we use the insights that come in from generative to help make predictive models moving forward? And can we combine them into one? I think we'll get there. I think we're probably a few years away. But I think we'll get there. I think combining generative AI, analytic AI will come up with some solution in the future. Maybe someone here in this room will come up with a way to do that. But I think that will happen in the future. They'll be combining both the generative and analytic. Any other questions from Zoom? Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate your time.
It was great.